So we're sitting here by the fire, and I've got my friend Jay here, and I think we're going to talk about some, I don't know, whatever you've been
talk
doing.
about
Well,
everything. I'm now an official member of Oregon Paranormal. I'm in charge of the historical research, which is good because that's what I love. Actually, probably the coolest stuff I've done, it was out at Tombstone. In fact, I went out there and met our friend Kayla, and she was going out there to Wyatt Earp Days. I do not recommend going out there for Wyatt Earp Days, especially if you want to do any research. If you want to go check out the town and Tombstone, that's a great time, but it's packed. People everywhere. In fact, it's probably the only place I've been to where I didn't feel out of place by having a huge mustache, because everybody had huge mustaches out there. I wanted to go down. I've always wanted to go to Tombstone, so I got on a flight, rented a car, drove down there, met her down there. But there was one place in particular I wanted to check out that I'd done some research on. Okay, so here's what's cool. One of the reasons why I'm excited about my new position with Oregon Paranormal is because I'm in charge of historical research. That's my true passion with a lot of the investigations I do, is trying to understand the history. You can investigate 100 different places and walk away from each one of those things learning nothing about any paranormal experiences, energy anomalies. A lot of times it's just by chance. But you can always walk away from a location learning the history of it. I've done a lot of history on Tombstone, the Clanton family, the Earp family, everybody involved with centering around the OK Corral. But there was one area that was really cool, and that was called Brunkhouse Cabin. Brunkhouse Cabin really doesn't play a part in it, but it all ties it together, and I'll explain that. Brunkhouse Cabin is considered the deadliest cabin in the state of Arizona. There were 22 murders that took place there over a span of time, including Brunkow himself. So Brunkow was a German immigrant who built his cabin out there. Inevitably, I think at one point he actually died having been killed and thrown down a mine shaft out there. But what's fascinating is I found the location of this cabin. And I got out there and I got some pictures. In fact, you've seen some of them, I believe. It's literally the foundation is all that remains. It's like an adobe foundation. But what's fascinating, so Ed Shefflin, he was a prospector, and he was kind of an explorer. Back in the mid-1800s, the big claim that was the big silver strike and was the Comstock lode. That was the huge one, worth millions. And Ed Shefflin decided he's going to go try and find the next Comstock lode. So he loads up all of his equipment. I believe it was in Nevada at the time that he came down into Arizona. And he ended up stopping by this fort to go ahead and refill his supplies and everything. And he was kind of explaining where he was going to go prospecting. And some of the guys out there said, why the hell would you want to go out there? There's nothing out there except for desert. It's a desolate area. There's nothing out there. Why would you want to go out there? You know, there's Indians everywhere. The only thing... Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
They said, why would you want to go out there? The only thing you're liable to find is your own tombstone, which is where the name of Tombstone, Arizona got its name. So while he's out there, he's prospecting different areas and trying to find his next claim. And he finds one spot that he thinks he's got a pretty good silver deposit on. So he grabs some samples, and the whole time he's prospecting and collecting his samples, he's processing his samples in Brunkhouse Cabin. He used Brunkhouse Cabin as kind of his home base, so to speak. So he finds this, what he believes is a big silver strike, takes some samples, and he heads back up to find his brother. And I believe his brother was in northern Arizona at the time. He finds his brother and says, hey, take a look at these samples. He has a few people look at the samples, and they're all like, yeah, that's nothing. You didn't really find a whole lot. But he finds this one guy, and he takes a look at it, and he says, holy crap, this has got quite a bit of silver in it. In fact, so much so that when he and his brother returned back, the guy who processed the sample came with him. He said, you were really onto something. We got to go down and check out this claim that you got. Well, when he gets back down to this claim, he realizes that someone else has moved in on his claim. And they get kind of in a dispute over who really owns this property, so they decided to split it right down the middle. And Ed Shefflin named his claim Contention, which is where the town of Contention got its name. Anybody who's seen some of the old Western movies and the Tombstone movies, Contention was kind of the bigger area that the train traveled through, heading towards Bisbee, which is another town. So here you've got Ed Shefflin, who not only founded the town of Contention, but also founded the town of Tombstone, and it all was kind of based in the bloodiest cabin in the state of Arizona, which is where it's got its start. Kayla and I actually went to an investigation at the birdcage, and we got talking to the owners, and they were talking about some odd anomalies that had happened out on this road. And they talked about seeing a woman on the road. They've stopped their car and couldn't find anybody. But there was one bridge. It was a single-lane bridge that when you get there, you have to wait to make sure there's no cars coming from the other side. But for some reason, multiple people have talked about driving across this bridge and forgetting that they even crossed over it. They think, well, where's the bridge? What's going on? Oh my gosh, you already passed it. Nobody can really recall actually driving over this bridge when you have to actually stop prior and recognize that there's no oncoming traffic. So we were talking about this weird location, and I got out my map and realized that this bridge that they're referring to is actually right off the road from where Brunkow's cabin is. And so this is kind of the whole thing where I try to tie in the history with the paranormal. Without history, the paranormal is just looking for energy oddities and anomalies and things, but when you can apply the history to it, that doesn't mean what we're finding has anything to do with that history, but at least it provides a foundation for your research and trying to understand the possibilities of what is going on. So who knows, maybe Brunkow's cabin had nothing to do with that location. Maybe that location had to do with the number of murders that took place there. Maybe it had to do with the oddities of the woman that they see on the highway and people forgetting to drive over the bridge. But what's weird is it's all in this small area in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere. So, and that's what I get excited about with the historical aspect of things.
Yeah, what were the other murders?
You know, they had various murders, gangsters hiding out in the cabin using it as a hideout. They had a law enforcement guy who was murdered there. And the interesting thing is they believe that some of the bodies are actually still buried out there.
Oh.
I don't know. And when we went out there, it was sunset and it was getting dark. We didn't have any flashlights or anything like that. Technically, the property sits on what I believe is BLM land, so it wasn't necessarily private property. We had the right to be out there, but it was surrounded by private property. But as you're walking to the cabin, there are mine shafts everywhere. Whoop, watch out for that one. There are mine shafts everywhere. And they try and do a good job of, surrounding them with barbed wire to keep livestock and people. But you'll be walking around out there, and all of a sudden there's this gigantic hole in the ground that'll drop down hundreds of feet, just straight down. So, and apparently that's where Brunkow himself was murdered and dropped down one of these mine shafts. And it's been difficult because it was so far back that Brunkow himself lived there, and being a German immigrant and the lack of any people living out in the area, finding historical information on Brunkow has been difficult. Hike out to Contention, but apparently the property owner back in the 60s and 70s was having a serious problem with vagrants moving in and living there, and he bulldozed it all down. And Contention is a huge historical location with some amazing history. They had a mission out there, but back then, history preservation, when you're trying to survive, wasn't something they really were trying to do. But hiking back through there, I didn't actually make it to Contention, especially because I found out it had all been bulldozed. But there's a few mill foundations out there, but I did find another cemetery. I did find another town that was located out there. There's still some buildings, and they use them kind of as a museum type place now. But I managed to walk back out and find the old cemetery up on the hill. That was cool too. That was pretty amazing. So that's and you know, we've gone on a bunch of explorations. Those are the kind of things that I like doing to find the weird stuff. And oftentimes I'm not necessarily going looking for paranormal. I'm looking for the history, walking in the footsteps of what was going on back in those days.